I had decided to return home unexpectedly that evening, just to see how my daughter was doing. Life had been busy, and we hadn't spoken much over the past few weeks. I wanted to check in, share a smile, maybe even catch a quiet dinner together. What I wasn't prepared for was the scene that would greet me. As I stepped through the front door, the house felt unusually quiet. The lights in her room were dim, and a strange heaviness hung in the air. I hurried toward her room, calling her name softly, then louder when there was no response. My heart started to pound. When I reached the hospital room she had been admitted to, yes, she was here, in the ICU. I froze. She was lying alone, hooked up to machines that beeped steadily, her small frame barely visible beneath the hospital sheets. Her face was pale, and her chest rose and fell with difficulty. I had never felt fear this sharp before. No one was beside her. No nurse, no relative, no friend. Just her, fighting every second to stay alive. I rushed to her side, gripping her hand, whispering words of encouragement, even as tears welled up in my eyes. The emptiness of the room, the loneliness she had endured, it was unbearable to witness. I felt anger and guilt mix in my chest. How had she been left alone like this? How had the people who should have been caring for her abandoned her in her most vulnerable moment? I made a silent promise, then and there. I would not leave her side, and I would do everything in my power to make sure she survived and was never alone again. The machine's beeping was rhythmic yet ominous, echoing the fragile line between life and death. And I realized in that moment that nothing would ever feel the same again. The ICU was cold and sterile, the hum of machines a constant reminder of how fragile my daughter's life had become. I sat by her side, gripping her hand so tightly I thought she might feel my own fear, my own desperation. She stirred slightly and I whispered, "I'm here. You're not alone anymore. I won't let go." Hours passed. Nurses came and went, but it felt like no one truly understood the urgency of her struggle. Each beep of the monitors made my heart race. Her breaths were shallow, uneven, and every movement seemed like a battle. I stayed silent, speaking only to her, willing her to hold on. At one point, the doctor approached, concern etched across his face. "Her condition is critical. We're doing everything we can," he said, but even his confident tone couldn't mask the gravity of the situation. I nodded numbly, my mind racing with memories of her childhood. How I had watched her take her first steps, celebrated her achievements, and now I was powerless, watching her fight for her very life. No one else was in the room. The loneliness she had endured cut deeper than any fear I felt. How had she ended up so isolated at the worst possible moment? My anger bubbled beneath the surface, but I held it in, focusing only on her survival. Hours felt like days. I whispered stories from her childhood, reminders of love and laughter, anything to keep her tethered to life. Each small reaction, a twitch of her finger, a flutter of her eyelids, gave me hope. And then, a slight change in her vitals, a flicker of color returning to her cheeks, made me realize that maybe, just maybe, she could make it through. But the fight was far from over, and I knew the days ahead would test both of us in ways I couldn't yet imagine. By the third day in the ICU, exhaustion had settled over me like a heavy blanket. My daughter remained unconscious, her small body still fighting, and I hadn't left her side for more than a few minutes. Nurses offered brief check-ins, but the room felt unbearably empty, as if the world outside had forgotten her struggle. Then, Late in the afternoon, a sudden alarm pierced the steady hum of the machines. Her heart rate spiked, and the monitor flashed red. Panic surged through me. I called for help, my voice trembling. Within seconds, doctors and nurses rushed in, cords and monitors in a flurry of controlled chaos. I stood frozen, clutching her hand as a nurse gently guided me to the side. "She's strong, but this is critical. Stay close," the doctor said. I nodded, feeling the adrenaline surge through my veins. My daughter's life hung in the balance, and every second mattered. Hours passed like a blur of prayers, whispered encouragement, and the constant monitoring of her vitals. I refused to leave, even to eat or rest. Her breathing steadied slightly, then faltered again, and each time I felt my heart stop. I realized how fragile life truly was, and how helpless I had felt these past days. Finally, late that night, a tiny movement, a squeeze of my hand, a soft flutter of her eyelids gave me hope. She wasn't out of danger, but she was responding. The doctors exchanged relieved glances, and I allowed myself a deep breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. In that moment, I understood the depth of her fight and the resilience she had inherited. This turning point wasn't just medical, it was emotional. It reminded me that life, even in its most fragile form, could not be taken for granted, and I vowed to protect her, never letting her feel alone again. The next morning, the ICU was quieter. My daughter had stabilized, and for the first time since I arrived, I allowed myself to step back for a moment. I watched her breathe steadily, the steady rhythm of the monitors providing a sense of cautious relief. When she finally stirred, her eyes fluttered open, confusion and fear mingling in their depths. I leaned close, holding her hand, whispering, "It's me, Mom. You're safe now. I'm right here." Her lips trembled, and she squeezed my hand weakly. I felt tears streaming down my face, not just from relief, but from the overwhelming weight of the past days. The nurses praised her strength, but I knew the real battle had been emotional as much as physical. She had faced those hours of isolation alone, fighting against fear, pain, and uncertainty. Seeing her now, aware and present, made every sleepless night and every anxious moment worthwhile. As the days passed, her recovery progressed slowly but surely. We shared quiet conversations, laughter, and tears. She apologized softly for not calling sooner, for not letting me know how serious her condition had been. I held her close, whispering that nothing mattered more than her survival. Through this ordeal, a bond deepened between us. I realized that sometimes love isn't just about being present in happy moments. It's about standing firm in the darkest ones. We had both been tested, and together we had survived. By the time the doctors allowed her to leave the ICU, she could sit up and speak, her voice still fragile but strong with gratitude. I knew the journey ahead would require patience, care, and healing. But for the first time in days, I felt hope bloom. Life had given us a second chance, and I intended to cherish it. The day my daughter was discharged from the ICU felt surreal. I walked alongside her, supporting her fragile steps, as the hospital doors opened to the world outside. A world that had seemed distant and meaningless while she fought for her life. We drove home in silence at first, both lost in our thoughts. Every beep, every monitor, every anxious hour flashed through my mind. I realized just how close we had come to losing her, and how precious each moment truly was. When she finally spoke, her voice soft and hesitant, she said, "Thank you for not leaving me. I couldn't have made it alone." I hugged her tightly, holding back tears. You don't have to thank me. You're my daughter. I will always be here, no matter what. Her eyes glistened with gratitude and relief. And in that instant, the weight of fear lifted, replaced by the warmth of love and connection. In the following days, I watched her regain strength, eat her favorite meals, and laugh again. Every small smile, every steady step became a reminder of resilience and hope. The experience had tested both of us, but it had also forged an unbreakable bond. I reflected on the ordeal, understanding that life could change in a heartbeat. We often take loved ones for granted, assuming they will always be there. But the ICU had shown me the fragility of life and the power of presence, care, and unwavering support. As night fell and I tucked her safely into bed, I whispered, "You're never alone. Not then, not now, not ever." She smiled softly, a quiet strength in her gaze. That night, I finally allowed myself to breathe, knowing that the worst had passed and that our bond was stronger than ever. Life had given us a second chance, and we would cherish every moment together. Thank you so much for watching this story till the end. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe even learned something from it. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, full of life lessons, drama, and emotions, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss an update. Your support means the world, and it helps me keep bringing you more inspiring and unforgettable stories. Stay tuned because more amazing stories are on the way.